So this is a quilt that our Studio Tuesdays we're working on. It's called Alberta Bound, and it's Delectable Mountain Squares. But I want to show you some of the ways that I square up again some of the blocks. So in my blog, Hip to Be Square, I talk about squaring up blocks. So I actually have, this is how we start out with our Delectable Mountain square. And I want to make sure that that's 9 inches exactly. So what I've done on my 12-inch square ruler is I've placed 2 pieces of painter's tape here just to remind me where 9 inches square is. And the other thing I do, you see that diagonal line? I'm going to line that right up on the diagonal just to make sure that that is a perfectly square and the line is 45 degrees. So I'm going to trim it to 9, and you'll see I'm also, one of my other tools I like to use is a rotating cutting mat. And this rotating cutting mat is amazing. Here we go. So I've got the first 2 sides squared, and I noticed it wasn't quite perfect, so I wanted to make sure to get these squares perfect. So now I've squared that up to 9 inches square. Now the nice thing about having this cutting mat rotate like this, I'm going to use another cool tool. And this is my 2.5-inch ruler. A lot of you have them, but in this particular pattern, I've adjusted it so that they're easy measurements instead of having wacky measurements. So it's a 2.25-inch strip that I'm going to be cutting here, and I just use my 2.5-inch ruler. There's 2.25, there's 2.25. And that's how quickly I can get my block ready for squaring up. Now there's another way to square up that block. So there's half of our square right there. But there is another way to square up this block. Here is the block that I've made the half square triangle. I can actually take that half square triangle, and using this ruler, there's a 9-inch marking on it. And I put that 9-inch marking right on the seam line, not on the edge line, on the seam line. And then I can trim this block just like that with 2 cuts only. And now again, I have a 9-inch square block. So it helps if you have a cutting tool that's got a sharp knife in it. Anyway, so now I've got again a 9-inch square block. It's nice to do it this way using this 9-inch line, and you can do that for any size half square triangle to square it up with just 2 cuts instead of 4. And just to move on to show you how we square up this block, this is what we end up with. This is our Delectable Mountains block, but it's an awkward size. It's 17.5 by 9 inches. So on my cutting table, you can see I've put painter's tape. I love painter's tape. And I put it here, and I measured it out 9 by 17.5 with a center line. So I know this is my center line here, and I want to match up my center line, which is right in the center of this one here. And then I can see there's my cutting line right there, and my other cutting line is right there. And I also know if I line it up to this line, there's my final cutting line here as well. So this is a great way to be able to cut your blocks without having to, try to figure out wacky sizes. You put the painter's tape on your cutting board and then use it like that. So that's my tips for squaring up your blocks.